From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Yeah, thanks, Ollie. It is absolutely belting it down in Salford this afternoon. It's a dirty old town today. Miserable. So it is. It's coming up for 3 minutes past 5. Wednesday, 19th of February. How you doing? Hope you've had a good day, regardless of the weather. I am Richie Allen, the BBG, not the BBC. Two brilliant guests lined up for you today. Important things to be talked about. Let's do it then on your Richie Allen radio show. Always good to be with you. And that is the truth. Let's do it then.
Fabulous.
It's all good.
It's the Richie Allen Show. Broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
And I mentioned on the live stream nonsense this morning on YouTube that I've invited John Kitson of 5G Awareness back to the programme, because I am being asked a lot, quite a lot actually, by people to tell them where the 5G transmitters are, where they're placed, where they've been switched on. And this is because a lot of new phones have, well, reached the marketplace in the last couple of weeks. Samsung more, I suppose, notably. iPhones are on the way, and Huawei have got a new phone out, Sony have got a new phone out, and they're all 5G ready. So we'll do that with John Kitson. Now, I won't waste too much time telling you about John Kitson. You know who he is. Successfully had a moratorium granted in Totnes to stop the rollout of 5G in that area. Very successful campaigner, and is working tirelessly to raise awareness about the human health implications of 5G technology. He was an independent candidate in the last, the most recent general election, of course, a month and a half, 2 months ago, in that part of the world, in Devon. If you want to find out more about 5G in the UK and elsewhere, 5gawareness.com, that's 5gawareness.com, is a really, really good resource. And you'll find out more about John there and the ongoing campaigns. I'm glad that he's stepped out to have a chat with us today, because a number of you, well, quite a few of you, were in touch with this programme to ask about the arrival on the market or in the marketplace of brand new phones. Samsung famously this week, brand new phones, very powerful mobile phones, smartphones, very sexy devices that are 5G compatible. Not just Samsung. The iPhone is, they've got a kind of a not a hybrid one. They've got these intermittent phones. They have their annual big releases, but they've got other releases of other phones and gadgets through the year. There is a new Apple phone, iPhone, coming out very, very soon. Huawei's got a new mobile out, and I mentioned earlier on Sony, all 5G. And people have been on to me saying, Richie, what's going on? Where are the transmitters? Where are they? Are they in town centres, Richie? Are they on our streets, Richie? What is happening? Because people can now can access 5G on their mobile phones. No better man to talk to about that than John Kitson. John, welcome back to the programme. How are you?
I'm very well, Richie. Thank you so much for having me back on the show.
You're welcome anytime. You know that. You've always got something to say, and that's important. Before we talk about that, before we get into the questions from listeners about the new phones, so 5G must be here. Where is it? Where are the transmitters? I've been fascinated today to kind of be trawling, not trolling, but trawling through social media. And a number of people in the US and elsewhere are wondering, now they can only speculate, they don't have any proof, but they are wondering if the coronavirus, COVID-19, this respiratory thing, which we've heard so much about in the last couple of weeks, this infection, this virus, they're wondering, because it emerged in the Wuhan province, and because of, obviously, the relationship between the Wuhan province and 5G and Huawei, people are wondering if there is a connection. Is it too early to speculate, John, or is that something that's worth investigating, do you think?
Oh, 100% worth investigating. I mean, it was back in 2018, it was reported that Wuhan would be the testbed city for the full 5G network operation in China. And this article went on to say that it would be fully operational by 2020. And of course, on the date of Halloween 2019, they actually turned it on. So this has actually been made fully functional before the first case of coronavirus came about, and Wuhan was the test bed. And if we look at the effects of 5G, we see a massive attack on the immune system. So people are much more vulnerable to all sorts of things like colds, flu. And if your immune system is sufficiently depleted, the common cold or flu can be a killer. And yeah, I think the problem is with China is you've got a population that doesn't question the government. You've got an unaccountable government, and they can get away with anything, quite frankly.
This is interesting, isn't it? Because if John Rappaport, the great medical journalist, is right, that, you know, incinerators, terrible air quality might play a part in what's happening to people in China, it doesn't mean that the 5G situation there is not playing its part. Because, as you said there, we do know, thanks to people like you, but I've also had the pleasure of, you know, speaking to people like Chris Busby and others who've been on to non-ionizing radiation for years. They say, just like you, John, that it does have an effect. They are convinced it will have an effect on the immune system. So that they might not be mutually exclusive. The bad air quality plus 5G might mean catastrophe.
Yes, totally. And I mean, you know, you look at the symptoms of flu, joint pain, bad heads, headaches. These are things that are coming up with the coronavirus, but also symptoms of microwave radiation. And of course, with this, if they do come out with a vaccine, and of course, there's a series that came out on Netflix where Bill Gates is the hero for this vaccine that deals with the pandemic. And of course, that's more metals going into the body. And the dangerous with that is, of course, compared with if you're consuming metals in your food, if you're getting it injected into your bloodstream, it's much more difficult to get rid of. And of course, the metals make you much more vulnerable. Having aluminium, for example, in your body makes you much more vulnerable to microwave radiation damage.
More susceptible to the effects of it. We've had a tweet from Jason about an article in El País in English, which is something I know very well. I haven't spent so many years in Spain. And El País in English is talking about dead birds being found in Tarragona this week. Lots of dead birds. And I know, I was away last week. I was unwell with a bit of an infection myself. I know that there have been instances in this country recently of large numbers of birds being found dead on certain roads. And Jason wonders, does the recent switching on of 5G have something to do with that? Could it be a way to explain why birds are dropping out of the sky?
Well, definitely. I mean, we're electromagnetic beings, and so are animals, you know, and they rely on magnetic fields for guidance. And not only that, is the size of birds, you're talking about a much smaller body mass. So they're far more vulnerable to microwave radiation than we are. And then you go one size smaller, you look at the insects, and where have all our insects gone? Yeah. You know, we've had about a 70 to 80% decline in insects over the last 20 years. And birds are next on the list. And of course, when I went up to Gateshead to participate in Mark Steele's court case, you know, where were all the birds? I just didn't see them. Yeah. And, you know, that there have been found, clusters of birds near masts, bees. These smaller animals are the most at risk from 5G, definitely.
A couple of years ago, I drove to Cornwall with the missus, and I didn't take the motorway the entire way. I took some secondary roads, went through some rural areas on the way down, partly because I wanted to get off the motorway, but partly because there were some accidents being relayed to me by my sat-nav thing and what have you. And late that night, we'd had a bottle of wine. We rented this house in Cornwall. The missus and myself, totally thrilled to be away for a week. And I got a bit emotional late that night. She was asleep, Caroline was asleep. And I realised there was nothing on the windscreen of the car. And that was the first time it brought it home to me about the insects. There was nothing on the windscreen of the car. I didn't say anything to the missus, John. But the following morning, I was thinking about it. I was very kind of, you know, I was in a bit of a fugue, a bit of depression about it. No insects on the windscreen. And I mentioned it on the radio program 2 years ago when I came back from a holiday. And I was deluged by people saying, Jesus, Richie, we've been driving as well to the country parks everywhere. We come back. Normally, John, you remember, John, back in the day, your car would be destroyed, right? With dead bugs. Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing, John.
Exactly. And I think this is something that we can see, that we can notice, because this is the problem with microwave radiation when you're approaching people who have no knowledge about it. And because they can't see it, they just think, oh, okay, this is in this person's imagination, or, you know, this person's panicking for no reason. But when you talk about the decline in insects, when you talk about the declining number of small birds, these are things that we can notice. When you talk about the antennas going up on the street lights, and it's really important about how we get the message across. And of course, yesterday we had the Devon County Council 5G Spotlight meeting, which will be going to scrutiny. And Devon, it's quite exciting because over here we've got the biggest anti-5G movement in the country.
Yeah. And
we're really aiming for a county moratorium, Richie.
That's what you want, John. You want to get a county moratorium on this. We park that. We'll come back to that. Chris Packham, by the way, just in case you're listening to this program for the first time, bit curious, and you think John is a raving lunatic conspiracy theorist, he isn't. He isn't. The BBC's Chris Packham wrote an article for one of the broadsheets last year. He was in the New Forest and he nearly died. There were no insects there. Couldn't believe it. This is a fact. This is not bullshit. It's happening. And, you know, you might say, oh, well, how do you know then that it's electromagnetic microwaves, that it's non-ionizing radiation? We know because it is. Because when you rule out everything else, what you're left with, even if it's unlikely, you've got to accept it might be the case. John Kitson is our guest, 5gawareness.com. Go to the website, check it out. We'll come back to how you're getting on in Devon. Great success last year. Hopefully you have more success this year in 2020. We'll come back to that. Now, you mentioned antenna on lampposts. Really glad you said that, because listeners have been tweeting me photographs of LED streetlights. And there are two different photographs doing the rounds. Some of them on top of the LED streetlight, they seem to have a kind of a round kind of fixture, which might look like a little light, but it's a round, it's a circular thing. Others have what looks like to be a very small antenna. Not trying to put you on the spot, but is there a difference? The street light that has the little round thing, how do we know that's got anything to do with 5G?
Right. Well, there's a possibility with the round nodules on top of the LED street
nodule.
light.
Thank you, my friend. Nodule. You've educated me. Nodule. That's the right word. That's the right bloody word. Yes, the nodules. What are they?
Yeah. So there's a possibility that they could just be light sensors. In other words, you know, controlling the street lighting on or off. And then these taller antennas are the 5G weaponized transmitters, which Mark's talking about.
Yeah.
But Mark's also mentioned that you can also get these surveillance items, whether it's a nodule or antenna on top of the street light, which also looks very similar. So I don't have a technological background, but as soon as you start to see those go up, the basic 5G infrastructure is going up, because of course what's happening up and down the country now, in most of the country we've got these LED street lights that are absolutely toxic and affecting people's eye health. They're increasing the rate of breast and prostate cancer. And once they've got those up, they can then, and they have these nodules up, they can easily be changed for these 5G antennas. And I actually referenced that in my presentation because it's important for people to pay attention how this is getting rolled out. It's not getting rolled out immediately. It's step by step. And people need to see what's going on in their area. And of course, the key thing to understand about 5G is its densification. The main definition of 5G being 5th generation. And this is the problem. It's undefined. But I like to think of it as the Internet of Things. So it's everything connecting with everything else. It's a lot more masts. I had a chat with Mark, and he told me that if you get one 4G mast in a town, it's 4G. But if you get 1,000 4G masts, like on these street lights, where they might call it 4G, it's then 5G, because you don't need it every 2 to 10 homes if it's not 5G. That's the difference. And you've got 4G LTE, again, which is 5G. They're not making it easy for us, Richie. But for people who want to know how it's getting rolled out across the country and the coverage, there is 5g.co.uk, and you can actually search your local area. And they already have 55 locations across the UK that already have 5G in operation. Now, of course, this is the official line. But as we know in Gateshead, they never announced that they were putting 5G there, but they were testing it there illegally. And Barry Trowers confirmed that they can actually roll this equipment out without actually announcing it.
They were, and they came after Mark Steele pretty hard when he blew the whistle on it. Mark was on the programme only a short time ago, and when this was going on a couple of years ago, he was on the show. It's good to give him a mention as well. And where you said you're not technical, which is pretty modest of you to say that, because you've done that much research now, I suppose. You know you've got as much technical knowledge as anybody else. But I want to pull you back to something you said a minute ago about LED street lighting. And you said it's toxic, and I've heard that said by people. I've even heard that said by medical people. And you've linked it to breast cancer and prostate cancer. I'm not trying to split hairs with you at all, or I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask you. How do we know that LED lighting is linked to prostate and breast cancer?
Sure. So you actually have an Exeter University study that came out quite a while ago, and that was actually referencing the connection. And what it is that the blue light interferes with the hormones. It interferes with the hormonal system and with melatonin, and that in turn can increase the rate of breast and prostate cancer. And this was a study actually led by the Barcelona Institute for Global Health, and it involved the University of Exeter. And they found that participants living in large cities with heavy exposure to blue lights at night had double the risk of prostate cancer and were 1.5 times higher risk of breast cancer. So anybody can look this up. They can Google University of Exeter and they can find this information.
Mark. Good man. Great answer. It is there, that information. And I said something. Listen, I'm not important at all. I'm not trying to big myself up. I did say a couple of years ago, I got a lot of stick for it. I said that the BBC represents a clear and present danger to the health of every man, woman and child in the UK because of what it doesn't do. And we've not heard a whisper about that. And LED streetlights have been rolled out right across the country. It's incumbent on the national broadcaster to tell people that scientists believe that these LED streetlights might be a problem for you and for your family. Not a whisper, Mark. Not a whisper.
Yeah, this is the problem. You know, we're getting nothing from the BBC, and they did some mini documentary showing this phone mast, and there were people up by the phone mast. There are actually special suits that workmen actually have to wear if the phone mast is already in operation. And I found out about this through Mark. But unfortunately, you know, the BBC, I mean, they get funding through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and other groups. And yeah, you know, it's really difficult reaching the mainstream media. Luckily, the Daily Mail, they have covered 5G quite a number of times and Wi-Fi and smart meters. And
fairly, they've done it objectively, I think, because the BBC have had you on more than once. But they've not so much tried to stitch you up. They've not given you very much time, and they've cut across you the usual tactics, which is dreadful. But you're right to mention the Mail, which a lot of people have problems with the Mail in terms of its coverage of politics and other things. But to its eternal credit, it does take an objective approach to 5G, right?
Yes, it's much better. You know, I mean, they covered Gateshead. They also covered the Totnes Moratorium, and then they did another follow-up article. And I was pretty pleased with what they mentioned. And of course, that's gone out to 11 million people. And of course, it's great to be able to get the word out on your show, Richie, because you've covered 5G a lot. And there are media, you know, that are not covering 5G. And Mark and I both say this: if you're not covering 5G, you're covering it up.
You're helping to cover
it's
it up.
One of the most important issues we're facing right now. It has, if we're looking at what's happening with China, it's definitely connected with 5G. And I think this is why we really need moratoriums up and down the country. And if we get a county moratorium, I think that's game over for 5G in the UK.
We're going to talk about that in a second. Your campaign to get a county-wide moratorium. John Kitson is our guest. 5G Awareness is John's website. It is 5gawareness.com. Couldn't be any simpler. You answered one of the important questions. You said that if people want to see where the things are, go to 5g.co.uk. So thanks for saying that. Some of our listeners should tweet it out. I'll retweet it. 5g.co.uk so you can see what the situation is in your own area. Number of people have asked the old question about why do we need 5G. Mark, the simple answer is, I believe you've told me this on previous programs, we don't need it. It's fast enough. The pre-existing connectivity hubs, I don't want to say hubs, but 4G, 3G, that was quick enough for everything we needed, right? It is for me anyway.
Well, exactly. Yeah, of course, we still had health problems with 3G and 4G, but the situation with 5G is there's going to be no escape, and all these different items are coming with Bluetooth nowadays, and this is why I recommend people buy a meter so that they can actually measure their exposure. Otherwise, you just don't know, what your exposure levels are. And just to add to the about where people can find out where 5G is, of course, there are secret deployments going on, and I would recommend, obviously, people also use Google Map, because Mark's also used that. And then, of course, you can zoom in and find some of these antennas on the street lights, possibly in areas where they're not officially announcing it. So I would say, people need to have those critical thinking skills and do some investigation if they're moving to a new location and they want to find out if these antennas are located there. Really
good information. Not to be depressing, I don't like to be depressing, but I've got to talk about these things with you. Didn't the media in this country report last week that more than half of children under 10 are now walking around with a smartphone? Jesus Christ, Mark. I don't want to offend people by blaspheming. I get a bit of criticism. I don't mean to say Jesus Christ so flippantly. But imagine, knowing what we know, imagine what it's going to be like in 15, 20 years, the rate of cancer cases in this country. If half children under 10 with their very thin, underdeveloped craniums are using these things, Mark, well, the outlook in the future is dreadful.
Yeah, it's going to be devastating because, again, children have a smaller body size than adults. We're seeing record depression, record rates of ADHD, child suicide. And the problem is children are bombarded everywhere. If they've got Wi-Fi at home, they've then got Wi-Fi in the schools. Schools are encouraging children to use tablets in the schools, so they're getting exposed from their iPads. Maybe there are smart meters in the schools. I mean, the school we've got here in Dartington, the primary school, where they had the mast erected, they also had smart meters and Wi-Fi in there. So kids are just getting bombarded on multiple levels, and they just don't have a chance. And I've got a friend who's up in Hereford, and he won't let his children use tablets. They're actually at this Steiner school where they don't use so much of this technology. They learn a lot of practical skills. And his children are so advanced for their age. They're so intelligent. And they're top of their class. And they're about, I think, 10 and 12, and they've never used tablets or smartphones in their life.
Brilliant. And just before we talk now about the moratorium, it is important to, if you've got young children and you're new to this, it's important that you pay attention here. The smartphone and the tablet has become a kind of a pacifier of sorts for children, and a soother, and it's not good, folks. It's devastating for the kid. Listen to the likes of Chris Busby, who's been researching this stuff forever and a day. Go to 5gawareness.com. You don't need your children carrying these devices, even holding them in their hands. They don't need them. And stand up to it and talk to your schools. When your school says in the future, which they will do, we want the children to have iPads and we're going to bring iPads into the classroom, speak up and ask them, have they done any safety testing around these devices and how they impact on children's health. Speak up, do that. John Kitson is our guest. Terrific success last year in Totnes, getting the local authority there to say, okay, we'll have a moratorium, we'll step back and we'll have a look at the implications of 5G. It was a great thing at the time, Mark. You want to roll this out over the entire county. How's that going, and how do you plan to go about that?
Right. Well, yesterday we had the Devon County 5G Spotlight Review at the County Hall, and a survey was sent out. Now, this is after a group of friends in Exeter. Of course, I've been engaging with Totnes and Kingsbridge. I got the moratorium there with help from others. Have been approaching Exeter, City Council, County Council. We've got so many people who are going to these meetings regularly. And then Devon County Council sent out a survey to get people's opinions on whether they thought 5G was a problem. Many people responded. We had hundreds of people. And then so they convened this Devon 5G Spotlight Review. And then the next stage would be scrutiny, when they'll bring in experts. Now, we had over 150 people turn up for this 5G Spotlight Review. There were just 10 people who were on the pro 5G side who turned up later. And of course, lots of documentation was handed in by the anti-5G group with lots of peer-reviewed research. So the councillors were thoroughly educated. And of course, depending on the result from the scrutiny meeting, where we'll have experts in, hopefully people like Barry Trower, they've been recommended.
Great.
Steele, doctors such as Erica Mallory Blythe as well. We've got a number of doctors, Sarah Starkey, and hopefully that will then, the result of that will have a moratorium. And I've been in touch with Susan Clark in the States, who's been having a lot of success with blocking phone masts, and she gave some really solid advice to me that I'd like to just announce on your show, Richie, if that's okay.
Yes, go ahead, mate. Yeah, absolutely. It's why you're here, John.
This is really solid, and it will help people to get through to their council. So the advice she gave is that it's really important to write down what you're saying at these council meetings and hand it over to the councillors, including the scientific research that you're referring to. There are over 25,000 studies showing microwave radiation causes harm. And do not use language like concerned or worried, because then the council can label you as emotional or mentally unstable. And instead of using those words or asking questions, make statements using facts. And avoid the precautionary principle, because the precautionary principle states that the science is unsettled when it is settled, because we have all these thousands of studies showing harm. So it's important to stress that you want a moratorium or a ban on 5G, because the science is settled on the dangerous effects of microwave radiation. And it's important to focus on microwave radiation instead of EMF, because EMF, electromagnetic fields, encompasses solar radiation. And of course, we benefit from sunlight. So we want to be careful that we're focusing. And that's the advice she gave. And I think that's really important that people take note of that. And we just really think about the strategy we're taking out when we're engaging. And some councillors will be completely ignorant. So we've got people who are meeting them one-on-one for a coffee or a tea, just breaking it down gently. If you say to councillors, look, we've got this Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, depopulation, they're going to start to close down. Although, yes, there are these plans in place. We've just got to take it from A to B, B to C, step by step, so that they can eventually get the big picture. And that's what's helped us in Devon to make all this progress.
You don't know just how important that last statement is. All of it is, but to say to people, listen, don't jump in with 2 feet when you're approaching somebody who's never heard of anything like this before. It's a great comment you made there. Don't start introducing, depopulation agendas, because you lose people. Deal in what you can prove. And as you said there, the science is settled. This is harmful. It's very harmful. It's known that it's harmful, and it's been known for a long time. And if you can gently introduce that to your local councillor. I think when we spoke, when you had the success in Totnes, we spoke about, you just mentioned there being very gentle with people, but at the same time, there is an underlying implication, isn't there, for elected officials. Without being threatening and overbearing, you are kind of saying to people, and I like this, listen, don't be in trouble in 5 or 10 years' time. Don't be the mayor or the mayoress or the council leader who did nothing. Think about it. There is a bit of that too, Mark, isn't there?
Oh, of course there is. I mean, you know, these people, you've got to see how to approach these individuals. And of course, the councils are not insured for damage caused by microwave radiation. And it's essential to stress that point at every single council meeting, because they're going to be held liable if they don't act. And in their constitutions, it is written in the council constitutions that they have a duty of care to the public, that they have to look after our health and well-being. And if they're abusing that duty of care and not following it, then they are liable. And of course, we know that the banks won't insure from health damage caused by microwave radiation. Some councillors will have children. Some councillors will have grandchildren. And you need to ask them, you know, do you have kids? Are you concerned about this world that your children will grow up in if 5G is rolled out? Maybe some councillors might care more about the environment. So it's really important to see what they care about, where their concerns are. I approached a Torbay councillor who was at the scrutiny meeting, who initially dismissed 5G as a Russian-fueled conspiracy, that Russia was somehow involved, because of course RT have been brilliantly covering.
They have indeed.
5G, and Russia, of course, is taking more measures to protect the public than we are, of course. But you know, and then we've had that moratorium in Switzerland, but I currently don't know the status of that, because there's an article that's come out that's said that okay, there's not a full moratorium, but we've got to keep fighting, and we're seeing more and more of these bans, more and more of these legal actions. But yeah, I think we've got to keep it up with the local councils, because that's a key battleground. And if we get a whole county to say no, that's going to have quite an impact for the rest of the country, because they just won't be able to roll this out, Richie, if enough local areas, and the battleground is local. It really is. We've just got to engage with our local. If people don't know people locally, start up a market stall, you know, start talking to people, start writing down names and addresses, create a network. And I'm willing to speak in any town. You know, you get enough people together to give a talk. Yeah, so, you know, we've just really got to keep the momentum going.
Yeah, it's really good, this. I'm really impressed with this, what you're doing there. And if you did manage to secure the county moratorium, well, the media that has ignored it won't be able to ignore it. They'll have to cover it. I mean, the Mail will cover it and RT will cover it, but they'll have to cover it, the BBC, give it more coverage. 5gawareness.com, we've got John Kitson on the line. John, interesting to me, a couple of people have tweeted about Big Pharma. Susan and others have tweeted there about sleep deprivation. And I absolutely believe that alongside everything else that people will experience when they're exposed to this wretched technology, sleep deprivation is definitely something to be looked at. And then you look at people getting sleeping medication, you look at people getting antipsychotic medication. The biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world, 5G is manna from heaven to them, isn't it? It must be.
Oh, of course it is. Yeah, because this is the problem. If people don't see the microwave radiation, they just assume, oh, it's some other health problem.
Yeah. They're
going into their doctor, or they're purchasing this medicine. And of course, the LED street lights are causing massive problems for people who are sleeping. You know, I've got friends who are driving around at nighttime who haven't bought these glasses yet, and they say they just can't get to sleep, or they're on their computers till late. Of course, you do have some computers, phones that can take off the blue light function. People need to have protective eyewear. This is absolutely essential. You need proper blue light protective glasses. You know, you can get them cheaply on eBay. I haven't looked into it in depth, so I can't recommend any particular one. But yeah, it's really important when your immune system is under such attack. It's important to be eating the right food, you know, cutting out sugar, not having too many grains. I've got a friend who would be able to talk to you a lot about that, actually. And yeah, just getting protective eyewear and just reducing your exposure wherever possible, you know, using wired devices, using, if you can't stretch your Ethernet cable all around your house, you can get D-Link, where you can plug it into the mains and the internet runs through the mains, and then you can just have the Ethernet cable coming from the plug socket. People can take these measures. It's not hard. And you're massively reducing your microwave radiation exposure.
Now, you've just educated. You see, this is the beauty of programs like this, when you've got a bit of time to talk. If you're on the BBC now, you'd have never gotten a chance to say that. You've just educated me. I never heard of D-Link. Now, this is massive. For me, it's massive anyway. So D-Link then is, you don't have to go drilling holes in your ceiling to run your Ethernet cable from, which is probably near your television, your hub. You don't have to go drilling holes in walls. You can get something called D-Link, which means you don't have to go through all that madness, and you can plug it into your mains. You see, I didn't know that, John. That's very important information.
Yeah. I'll look up the website and information, and I'll send it to you, Richie. But yeah, I think people need to embrace these safer solutions.
Yeah, get rid of the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, companies then will be motivated, because what we're seeing now, unfortunately, with the new phones, I mean, you look at the iPhone 11, I believe that even if you switch it off, it's still emitting radiation. And that's a really serious problem.
How does that work if you switch it off? Is it because it's still hot and it's still pulsing something out, even when it's switched off? How does that work?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I just saw a video, and then also I saw an article as well. I can't remember off by heart where I saw it, but the chap was testing it with a microwave radiation meter, an Acousticom 2, which I've got, and it was giving off microwaves. And with the routers now, it's getting more and more harder to find routers where you can actually turn the Wi-Fi off. And you've got to call up the phone company. I mean, BT is the worst. You get these routers, BT Smart Hub, you know, it's got smart in the name, and you have to, it doesn't only, you have to request for the Wi-Fi to be turned off, but it also emits a separate wireless hotspot where other people can then log on to your Wi-Fi. I mean, it's crazy. But yeah, we've got to get these safer solutions out there, and just encourage people to make more sensible choices.
Hey, listen, good luck with everything there in Devon. You know that it's hugely important to us to be talking about this. Thanks for doing the work, because there's nothing in it for you. I know you'll say there is for your friends, for your family, for their children, for your own children. I know there is, mate, but it's a thankless task, I think, what you're doing there, you and Mark Steele and others as well. You mentioned the doctors that you've got working with you. I think it's massively important, and I think people should help you out where they can. And if you can't help out, folks, go to 5gawareness.com, read more about it there, and help out these campaigns if you can. 5gawareness.com. So do keep us posted on that, Mark, there in Devon. And all I can say to you, mate, is thanks for giving us your time. And when you're up in Manchester or Salford, it might be Manchester, Greater Manchester, let us know, because I'll come along to sit in the audience and to pay attention like everybody else, and to buy you a beer at the end. I really appreciate having you on the programme.
Thank you so much, Richie. No, it'd be great to connect. And yeah, if people do want to support me, they can support me via the website, through PayPal, or just get in touch if they want to do it another way. And we have got a couple of events coming up. There's Emma Johnson. She's very interesting. She'd be interesting for you to connect with. She's over in Bournemouth, and she ran as an independent MP. She's got an event on February the 22nd in Dorset there, Southbourne. That's on the website, on my website, 5gawareness.com. And then
Saturday, right? That's Saturday. Emma, that's this coming Saturday, the 22nd.
That's right. And then on the February the 24th, on the Monday, Mark Steele's going to be speaking in Durham.
And all of those events, links to them can be found at 5gawareness.com. Good luck with everything that you've got going on. I really appreciate it, Mark. Thanks for coming back today.
Thanks, Richie, for having me on. It's a pleasure.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you for the work you do. John Kitson there, 5gawareness.com. And that'll be very interesting to see how he gets on now on a county on a county level, because they got Totnes to issue a moratorium to suspend 5G based on the work he and others did there. He's a good guy, he'll say. Of course, he's right that it wasn't just him, there were others involved there as well. But I think his whole approach to dealing with people is something that every single one of us can learn. When you're dealing with officialdom, they're not all a shower of bastards, you know. I know that the temptation is to think that they are. You know, well, if they're working for the council. Yes, yeah. And that's what it's easy to think like that, but they're not all like that. Think of compartmentalization. If you can keep that phrase, it's not a phrase. If you can keep that word in your mind, compartmentalization. For somebody with a degree in English, is it a noun? Compartmentalization. Not everybody working in officialdom is a bastard. And like John said, they don't know this stuff. You know, they don't know it because the chances are your next door neighbour doesn't know it about 5G, about non-ionizing radiation. It's a very good chance the guy living next door to you or the woman living next door to you just won't know. What was that now? When you say, you know, this pulsing, non-ionizing radiation, this microwave, it does bad stuff. And they're like, what now? Since when? They might say to you. So don't assume that people are in on it or that they're covering it up. And I think his approach is brilliant. To say to people, look, here is the peer-reviewed scientific facts from academic men and women in some massively famous universities around the world. Here it is. They say conclusively that it is dangerous, that it is toxic, that it creates a toxic soup with serious implications for people and humanity. So take that information and look at it. These are the facts. And gently remind these people, you don't want to be sued in a few years' time because we can demonstrate that you were given the information, but you didn't do anything about it. So I really appreciate that approach, you know. It's my approach. It wasn't always my approach. Mea culpa. I'm as guilty as the next person as going over the top when talking to people about conspiracy research, going over the top. And, you know, starting off with geoengineering and ending very quickly in the same sentence with depopulation. People's eyes glaze over, you know. They glaze over. David has been on to tweet, Richie, even a digital bed clock emits enough EMF to disturb sleep. Even a bedside lamp, says David. Turn it off at the socket. Thanks, David. That's been said to me before by a guest on the programme a long time ago. That's interesting, that. Chris tweets, yes, there is no need for wireless. Richie, he says, in the house. You can feed the internet around the house via the mains, giving multiple Ethernet plugs in other rooms. Netgear is the top brand. As says Chris, we're giving a plug there to Netgear. And Chris is the CEO of Net. No, he's not. Hi to John. John says, Richie, I bought a pair of driving glasses. The driving glasses. Because the LED streetlights and car headlamps were playing havoc with my eyes at night. They turn all the lights orange. The difference has been incredible. I'd recommend buying a pair. They cost next to nothing. You see, John, that's a very good point. We didn't even mention the fact that many cars these days have LED headlights. And thanks to John Kitson, go to 5gawareness.com to either support what John is doing, to find out where John and his colleagues are speaking in a town near you,